I'm Saverio Favaron. I'm an assistant professor in strategy at SKEMA Business School. So before joining SKEMA, I got my PhD from HEC Paris, and I started my job as an assistant professor in the middle of the pandemic, like in August 2020. So in terms of research interest, I would say that in general, I work on processes of social evaluations, mostly at the organizational level. So I'm really focusing especially on the impact of ratings, rankings, and how they drive responses from organizations, strategic responses, or other types of behaviors. In terms of context, with my dissertation, I started to look in particularly at these dynamics within more creative industries like fine dining, which are more interesting, I think, because intrinsically there is a more difficulty in evaluating the quality of the offering. Besides that, I have an interest in general in understanding how evaluations produced in online settings and social media are different from more traditional evaluations from experts and critics, and how that also affects the reactivity of firms. How do they potentially learn from the feedback they receive from these users, which is really characterized by peculiar features. There is opacity about the criteria for evaluations. There are lots of subjectivity, for example, by consumers on social media. So how that is changing a bit the landscape of evaluations. Okay, so the why I started working on this, I think there is a mix of factors that contributed to my interest. So definitely, as it happens in many cases, there was some influence of advisors and people I worked with that also had a previous interest in general on some of these aspects and some particular industries, for example. At the same time, at some point during my PhD studies, I had the opportunity to work on some data on online reviews. And at that point, I started to kind of, realize the potential of understanding, processes of social evaluation, in particular in relation with this, online generated type of evaluations. And so that is where really everything started. So as I said, it's really like understanding how these evaluations different from previous and other more classic evaluation systems, and linking also evaluations from customers with the concepts of reputation of firms, the status of firms, how for example the evaluation of customers is counterbalancing opinions of experts, and how status changes at the organizational level can affect producers when at the same time reviewers on online platforms are producing maybe contrasting or diverging opinions. So to go back to your original question, it's really like a mix of factors, but I think the real starting point was really having the opportunities to dig a bit deeper into these data that I believe are very rich and can be analyzed in many ways. You can learn from text, you can learn from numerical scores, you can really learn a lot from this rich data, and everything started from there. This is a project that, first of all, it's co-authored with colleagues from Bocconi University, Clara De Palma and Giada Di Stefano. And Clara is really the driving force behind this paper, I have to say, which is a project, as you say, about intermediaries and how they interact and influence each other. So what we do in this project is quite simple in the sense that we really try to leverage some sort of natural experiment or like external shock occurring on TripAdvisors that at some point started to give visibility to evaluations from Michelin. And we look at the impact of this change on the interface of TripAdvisor pages on the evaluations of customers. So we look at these differences in evaluations pre and post shock, especially focusing on the extent to which evaluations from customers become more or less similar to what experts in this case Michelin inspectors say in the reviews of the restaurants. And we also have a control, to control for potential changes operated by restaurants. At the same time, we also control for the reviews posted in the same periods on Yelp. So we focus in this case on the US fine dining industry. We have 3 cities in the US covered by the Michelin Guide, and we use this information from both TripAdvisor and Yelp. Okay, so in terms of findings, I will briefly summarize them. So we observe indeed that there is a tendency of evaluators, like consumers, to conform more to the opinion of experts, starting from the weeks following the introduction of this status badge on consumer pages. The motivation is that so multiple intermediaries, so multiple evaluators are very common to observe in many markets. And there is research, to be honest, that shows how intermediaries affect each other, whether there is conformity between the opinions of the same type of intermediaries, like experts, for example, to what extent they try to differentiate or conform to each other. But there is less research on the interaction and the influence between different types of intermediaries evaluating the same actors or the same subjects. So that is the reason why we wanted to understand a bit more the dynamics of this influence. In terms of challenges, there are several, mostly related to data and really getting like a rigorous empirical design that ensures some identification at least. So we tried our best, leveraging some sort of shock in the way information is presented to users. Also, using some controls potentially. But there's also an additional challenge when we start to get a bit more behind the surface. So, for example, in the paper, we also believe that there is a different influence on different type of users. So users that are more high status users, more visible, more knowledgeable, we believe should be more inclined to differentiate their behaviors from experts. And so in order to understand and see these potential effects, we need to collect really detailed information about the characteristics, like individual characteristics of reviewers on online platforms, and that brings a lot of additional challenges in terms of accessing that information, and so comparing the profile of different users in how they respond. So yes, so I think this is the main challenge. So which we are still trying to overcome. In terms of implications, I say the main one is that what we observe is that there is still a significant influence of expert evaluators on consumers, so on amateur evaluators, which in general should be good news for producers who are often facing, when there are multiple intermediaries, these different pressures and divergent opinions of evaluators, well, at least in the context of fine dining, let's say. On the other hand, and this is something we're still trying to explore in some extensions of the study, there is a potential, risk in showing status markers from the perspective of producers, because there is some indication that, for example, the ratings of consumer reviewers could decline a little bit after these status markers are shown, which may be suggestive of the fact that expectations of consumers change, and that may have some unintended consequences in the way they evaluate the offering. And at the same time, there is the possibility that some groups of consumer reviewers, in this case, more high status reviewers, may be willing to show different behaviors. And again, that may lead to some, let's say, negative impact. So it's something that needs, more work to understand really the dynamics. In general, I would say, again, taking the producer's perspective, it's like good news in terms of the influence that experts can still have on consumers, but with some potential areas that need more attention. And I would say, in particular, the impact on the ratings these organizations get when they become more visible because of these high status markers. And we know there is anecdotal evidence showing that sometimes it's not always positive to show your badges associated with status, because people come in with very different expectations, and then their evaluations could be negatively affected. Let's mention one project where we look at how reactivity to consumer ratings works, again, in the restaurant setting. So we employ like a mixed methods approach to understand how firms, how restaurants, to what extent they're more likely to integrate information in consumer ratings into their actual business practices, which brings a lot of additional challenges, because you're really required to go beyond the surface of what you observe online. So we have a mix of like experiments and interview data to understand that the conditions or the factors that lead some organizations to be more responsive to feedback and accepting feedback more. So we know that these kind of evaluations online is often seen with some caution because of all the problems related with fake information, or like consumers who are just very emotional but not objective. And so we really try to go beyond the surface and to understand this kind of dynamics. And we observe a lot, for example, a lot of decoupling in their behavior. So online, they really say something, they show they're accepting the critique or something, but then behind the scenes, in most cases, they're not really willing to learn from this kind of feedback, which could in reality be very helpful for many of these businesses to improve some practices and make some changes. I have a general interest in evaluations, but at the same time, I really like this dimension related to this online digital aspect of evaluations. So let's say, what it's called this algorithmic nature of evaluation, how that is changing a bit the general landscape of reputation formation and evaluation more in general. So I have some projects that really start more this phenomenon, let's say, and how that is affecting and is changing also the way companies do business, the way company, for example, deal with, use impression management, protect the reputation. And so this is the link I see. Okay. So there is clearly this focus on more theoretical on different intermediaries and evaluations, but there is also this more phenomenon driven interest of understanding how digitization has really changed a lot of situations related to how firms deal with ratings, rankings more in general. And so that's why I have some projects where I look more specifically at the context of online communities and just online data and firms strategies to deal with this very different landscape. I still think that I'm trying to find some recipe. I don't think I successfully managed to do all these things. So I can just reflect a little bit on what I think are some important things to keep in mind. And probably based on my experiences, the fact that you need to find environments where you feel comfortable, which may sound trivial, but we are all very different in terms of what kind of environment we need to, for example, be productive. Some people really like to be in really collegial environments, which means departments, or others like to work under pressure a bit. So they like to be in more competitive situations because they're forced to give the best. And that, I think, at least for me, that played an important role in some of my decisions before, and helped a lot in managing this constant pressure from this and the family, work, and all the requirements. On the other hand, I'm not sure I really managed to find the secret to be super productive, but at least I can say that, of course, I always try to focus on the quality aspect. Probably because of the training I got and the influence of my advisor. So I like to, spend lots of time to find the best, empirical design. It's the best data possible to find answers to the questions I have. And so that is something I'm still trying to do with my current projects. Is really to find a balance between your passions when for example, when you select topics to work on, and the advisors you pick. So I believe it's very important to have this balance, because you really want to enjoy what you do, so work on topics you like, but you also want to have really people that, first of all, that care about you, but also that can offer guidance and help you navigate, the communities, academic communities, and understand, what is more potential work, which directions you could go. So this decision, I think, is very important if I'm speaking about the early decisions of, for example, PhD students. Other things, more, thinking about the later stages of a PhD, or like the first years as a junior scholar, I think it's really critical to the way you select people you work with. So after your dissertation, you're really facing this phase where, you have new projects and lots of new opportunities to start new projects. I think it's important to try to keep, coherence in the portfolio of projects that you embark on. I'm still struggling myself with this sometimes, because there are many interesting things that I would like to work on. But managing, having some coherence between your projects, it's very important also, because then it's also easier to switch between one project and the other, and have some sort of try to get some sort of identity. And again, in my experience, like working with friends or people you really feel comfortable working with, I think it's a key dimension. So I'm always happy when I have a meeting with some co-authors in other countries, because they're primarily my friends, and so that I think that helps a lot in enjoying even difficult part of the work, if you're really doing this with someone who's like a friend or like a colleague with whom it's really easy to work with.